The Sharon Woods Prairie sits on approximately 80 acres inside of the larger Sharon Woods Metro Park in Westerville, Ohio. The park is administered by the Columbus and Franklin County Metro Park System and was opened to the public in 1968, making it one of the oldest parks in the system. It's flanked on two sides by I-270 and I-71 and is also surrounded by a populous residential area. Aside from the prairie, the park is also home to large swaths of forest, a lake, a creek, a nature preserve, and a wide array of trails, shelters, and other mixed-use areas. Currently, the prairie is home to a wide variety of native flora and fauna. The plant community is dominated by big bluestem and Indian grass, with many native wildflowers such as tall sunflower, tall goldenrod, purple coneflower, and royal catchfly. Wildlife in the prairie includes white-tailed deer, eastern bluebirds, tree swallows, and bats.
However, not all is well at the Sharon Woods Prairie. There are still many restoration challenges to overcome. Some of these are deer overpopulation, invasive species, and the difficulty of conducting prescribed fires in an urban area. The deer population of Sharon Woods experienced a rapid rise from 1970 to the 1990s, and overpopulation quickly became an issue. Herbivory pressure from deer have a large impact on the plant species that share a habitat with them, and when there are too many deer, they can wipe out entire populations of some species. At Sharon Woods, the deer created an ecological desert, killing nearly everything within reach.
There were zero wildflowers in the park, no tree saplings could survive, the birds left that nest on the ground. It was a whole domino effect for the whole ecosystem, so it'll never be what it was.
Today, the deer population at Sharon Woods is much more under control than it was in the 90s, but in all likelihood, it will continue to be a problem for the foreseeable future. Like many other natural areas in Ohio, Sharon Woods has to deal with invasive species. In the prairie, the main invasive species include Russian olive, bush honeysuckle, multiflora rose, and European alder. European alders were originally planted as decorative trees around the lake adjacent to the prairie, soon after Sharon Woods became a metro park. After the trees matured, they began to reproduce and became invasive. Today, European alder saplings are one of the most common woody encroaching plants in the prairie, where they shade out native prairie plants. Russian olive, bush honeysuckle, and multiflora rose also contribute to woody encroachment within the prairie. This woody encroachment problem is exacerbated by the infrequency of prescribed burns within the prairie.
We really need to do it every other year or so.
Under a natural disturbance regimen, fire would remove any woody encroachers while they are still small, keeping the prairie open. However, the prairie is currently only burned once every 9 to 10 years, which just isn't often enough to keep these invaders at bay. Sharon Woods' extremely populous and highway-adjacent location makes the planning steps involved with a prescribed burn a very intensive process. To perform a burn, the park must complete a large planning document and notify multiple nearby emergency services, including fire stations, police stations, and the State Highway Patrol. Additionally, very few people in Ohio have a license to manage a prescribed burn. Combined with the park's limited resources, these make frequent prescribed burns simply unfeasible.
The prairie that exists today was not always as diverse and ecologically healthy as it is in the present. There have been many methods that the metro parks and their staff have used to deal with these daunting issues. In order to develop these methods, SMART goals can be an incredibly valuable resource. To our knowledge, the park has not taken advantage of this system, so we made goals that align with their restoration efforts. Sharon Woods' long-term objective for the prairie has been to develop a diverse prairie ecosystem of native Ohio species that can be used to teach the public about prairies and their importance. One associated medium-term objective was a significant reduction in invasive species and deer grazing within the prairie. Their second medium-term objective was to increase public interaction and learning in the prairie. To accomplish these objectives, the park needed to decrease local deer populations, remove invasive species, and take steps to perform disturbances that would mimic a natural disturbance regime within the prairie. They aimed to reduce the deer population in the park to 20 deer within 5 years, create a volunteer group to perform invasive removals, lead 5 naturalist-led tours of the prairie each year, and either burn or brush hog 50% of the prairie each year. The success of these steps would be monitored through thermal imaging counts of deer, populations in the park, visual surveys of invasive species in specific sections of the prairie, and whether naturalist tours and burns or brush hogging had been completed at the required thresholds. After 5 years, the park would step back and evaluate success or lack thereof for the goals, and use that information to create new goals. Another thing that the park needs to accomplish their restoration goals is reference material. Sharon Woods has a rich history and a storied group of staff members who are able to use their experience and knowledge of the past iterations of these prairies to inform their decision making. Allison Shaw has been on staff for just over 20 years. Her insight and knowledge about the recent history and past methods of restoration in the park allow the staff to compare the prairie in its current state with prior restoration work. The staff also keeps records of the park, including old pictures from when the property was first inhabited by the Schrock family. Finally, Sharon Woods is part of the larger Metro Parks system, which enables them to draw on the experiences of other prairie restoration projects, such as that of Battelle Darby. Throughout the long-standing process of restoration and monitoring, the staff at Sharon Woods have changed their techniques and altered their methods through adaptive management. By monitoring the success of restoration work and changing methods in response to external constraints or poor results, they are able to better achieve their goals over the long term. This allows the staff to avoid the cookbook style of restoration that prevents many projects from being successful.
One of the largest and most noticeable methods of restoring the ecosystem are prescribed burns. Sharon Woods has completed multiple prescribed burns in the history of the park, with 2 in the last 15 years. These helped stimulate the prairie ecosystem and open up space for native species to flourish. Unfortunately, Sharon Woods' urban location makes frequent burns infeasible. Even with the limited number of burns in the park, the staff use these opportunities to educate the surrounding community about the benefits of prescribed burns and the safety involved.
One of the resource managers stopped by and said, "Hey, we're burning the prairie tomorrow. I'll let you know if we're not, but I'm 99% sure." So I went ahead and emailed our homeschool community, because obviously all the school kids would be in school during that day and I didn't have a field trip planned. So I emailed our homeschool community and they were able to come out, and I was able to kind of teach them what was going on. And we had about 80 people show up. Yeah, so that was pretty. It was a gorgeous day outside, and we brought pictures of some of the prairie plants, because we burn the prairie usually in March or early April, and there's no flowers blooming in the prairies at that.
Due to the difficulty of performing a prescribed burn in the park, the staff at Sharon Woods must take advantage of alternate methods to keep the prairies healthy and diverse. Annually or biannually, the maintenance technicians brush hog portions of the prairie. Brush hogging mimics a burn by mowing down areas to create space for more organisms and native plants to grow. These mows are done primarily during the winter seasons to offset the growing season. While it isn't a perfect analog to a prescribed burn, this method does help maintain control over invasive species. Unfortunately, the technology and advanced know-how to deter invasive species in the park isn't always available. Because of this, the park utilizes many local volunteers to pull invasives and help educate the public about restoration methods. These volunteers are trained on invasive identification and removal and help keep them in check year-round. The overabundance of white-tailed deer in Sharon Woods has decimated its wildflower population. To combat this, the Metro Park staff conduct deer cullings that keep the deer population in check over the years. At first, this method was quite controversial, and the parks received a lot of public backlash when the plan was initially proposed. However, by engaging with the issue at public forums and showing that other deer control plans such as relocation or sterilization were infeasible, they were eventually able to move forward with yearly culls. This is just one example of how Sharon Woods has engaged with and represented the public. The Metro Park system receives its primary funding through a tax levy, so the stakeholders of the Metro Parks are the residents of Franklin County. To make sure that their voices are heard, the Metro Parks holds public forums when making important restoration choices, notifies residents whenever potentially disruptive methods are being performed, and forms deep connections with residents and volunteers. This allows for long-term collaboration and a positive relationship with these stakeholders, ensuring that the restoration projects can continue to happen within Sharon Woods and other parks.